Have you ever won an argument only to feel like you've lost something far more important? Have you ever walked away from a conversation, your heart pounding, your mind racing, replaying every word, every rebuttal, and felt that cold, hollowing sense of exhaustion? You know that feeling, don't you? That in your desperate attempt to be heard, you've lost a piece of yourself. You spend your days in a state of constant explanation, a relentless performance of justification. You justify your choices, your feelings, your boundaries. You explain your reasoning to your partner, your boss, your friends, your family, believing that if you can just find the right words, the perfect logic, they will finally understand. But they don't. And the more you talk, the less they seem to hear. The more you explain, the more you are misunderstood. The harder you fight to be seen, the more invisible you become. You are pouring your life force into a bottomless void, trying to fill the emptiness in others while draining your own energy. This is the quiet tyranny of a world that demands you speak, that equates your value with your volume, your worth with your willingness to engage in its endless, pointless debates. You have been taught that silence is weakness, that to remain quiet in the face of accusation is to surrender, that to withhold your opinion is a sign of passivity, of defeat. This is a lie. It is perhaps the most profound and disempowering lie you have ever been told, a lie designed to keep you reactive, predictable, and controllable. The truth is that silence, the kind of silence we will explore today, is not an absence, it is a presence. It is not a void, it is a mirror. It is not a retreat. It is a carefully calibrated instrument of perception, a strategic act of power so immense that it can fundamentally alter the dynamics of any relationship in your life. When you master the art of strategic silence, you stop being a participant in their drama and become an observer of their reality. You are no longer the puppet on their stage, reacting to their provocations. You become the director of the entire production. When you go silent, you finally stop listening to their words and start seeing their soul. For this journey, we turn to one of the great masters of the human psyche, Carl Jung. Jung understood that most people do not live from a place of conscious wholeness, but from a fractured state, dominated by what he called the persona in the shadow. The persona is the mask we wear for the world, the polite, agreeable, socially acceptable version of ourselves. It is the face of the good employee, the loving partner, the dutiful child. The shadow, however, is everything we repress in ourselves to maintain that mask, our insecurities, our fears, our resentments, our hidden desires, our untamed power. The average person is in a constant, unconscious war with their own shadow. They spend their psychic energy keeping it hidden, denying its existence. This creates an immense internal pressure. And here's the secret that will change everything for you. That repressed energy must go somewhere. Jung called this phenomenon projection. When a person is unwilling or unable to face their own inner darkness, their psyche unconsciously flings that darkness outward, projecting it onto the nearest available screen, and that screen is often you. Your words, your explanations, your arguments are the perfect surface for this projection. When you engage, you are giving their shadow something to fight. You are validating their internal drama by providing an external enemy. You are focusing their energy outward, on you. You become a convenient distraction from the chaos raging within them. They are not arguing with you. They are arguing with the parts of themselves they cannot stand but see reflected in you. But when you go silent, you take that screen away. You become transparent. You create a vacuum, a void. And the human psyche, like nature itself, abhors a vacuum. Into that void you create, their shadow, with nowhere else to go, begins to emerge into their own consciousness. Their repressed insecurities, their hidden motives, their unexamined anxieties all come rushing to the surface, seeking an object, a reason, a target. And in that moment of desperate flailing, you see them for the first time, not the mask they present, but the true, wounded, and often terrified being that hides behind it. This is not an act of aggression, it is an act of radical truth. Remember, what we are exploring is not a passive punishment, but an active form of perception. Now, let us bring this from theory into the crucible of your daily life. Let's examine 4 scenarios where this approach can reveal the hidden truth. Consider a man named Mark. Mark is a fixer. He believes that love is a process of perfect communication and endless problem solving. His partner, Sarah, is often unhappy, a quiet storm of sighs, subtle criticisms, and unspoken disappointments. For years, their dynamic has been the same. Sarah expresses a vague dissatisfaction about their plans, about the house, about him. Mark immediately goes into action. He asks questions. He proposes solutions. He explains his intentions. He apologizes for things he doesn't understand. He is a whirlwind of words, a frantic effort to repair a breach he cannot even see. He thinks he is being a good partner, but in reality, he is slowly erasing himself. His every word is a plea for approval, a desperate attempt to manage her emotional state. He is exhausted, and the more he talks, the more distant Sarah becomes. One day, after learning of this principle, he decides to try something new. Sarah mentions, with a familiar cutting tone, "You always seem so busy with your own projects. It must be nice to have all that time for yourself." The old Mark would have leaped to his own defense. He would have listed his contributions, explained the pressures of his work, and tried to justify his existence. The new Mark does something terrifying. He says nothing. He simply looks at her, holds her gaze with a calm, neutral curiosity, and then gives a slight single nod, as if to say, "I have heard you." Then he turns back to what he was doing. The silence that follows is not empty. It is deafening. It is a space that Mark's frantic explanations used to fill. Sarah is left alone in that space with her own statement. For a moment, she is confused. She was expecting a fight, a familiar dance of justification and pursuit. She has her script, but her scene partner has just walked off the stage. She tries again a little louder. "I just feel like I'm not a priority sometimes." Again, Mark looks at her. He puts down his book. He gives her his full attention, but not his words. He listens. The silence stretches. It is no longer his responsibility to fill it. It is hers. And into this space, something new emerges. Sarah's voice, now less accusatory and more fragile, says, "My friend just got back from her trip with her husband, and I guess I just feel a little lonely today." The truth. It was never about his projects. It was not an indictment of his character. It was a raw, vulnerable admission of her own insecurity and sadness, born from a comparison she was making in her own mind. For the first time, Mark is not reacting to her accusation. He is witnessing her feeling. He didn't win an argument, he transcended it. He didn't use words to fix the problem. He used silence to reveal it. He moves to her, not with a solution, but with a simple, quiet presence. He didn't talk his way to a resolution. He created a space for a true connection. His silence, his refusal to play the old game, forced her true, hidden self, her shadow of loneliness and envy, to finally speak its name. Now, consider Evelyn, a brilliant strategist at a marketing firm. She is talented, but quiet. Her boss, David, is charismatic, but deeply insecure. In meetings, a toxic pattern has emerged. Evelyn will present a well-researched idea. David will listen, nod, and then, later in the same meeting, he will repackage her idea as his own, using louder words and more confident gestures. Her colleagues, seeking to align with power, then attribute the idea to him. Week after week, Evelyn leaves these meetings feeling a familiar, burning sense of injustice. She has tried to fight back with words. She has politely interjected, "Yes, David, as I was mentioning earlier," only to be spoken over. She has sent follow-up emails clarifying the origin of the idea, only to be ignored. Every word she speaks in her only makes her seem petty and insecure. Then she adopts the strategy of silence. The next time it happens, the moment David co-opts her idea and presents it as his own grand vision, Evelyn does nothing. She does not fidget. She does not sigh. She does not roll her eyes. She simply fixes a calm, unwavering, and unreadable gaze upon him. She holds it. She is not angry. She is not defeated. She is an observer, a scientist watching a specimen. David, accustomed to either her deference or her flustered objections, feels this new silent attention. He feels it like a change in the room's pressure. He falters for a moment. Her silence is a mirror, and in it he sees his own theft. His words, usually so fluid, become slightly more hesitant. He glances at her, seeking the familiar reaction, but finds none. He finds only a calm, knowing stillness. The silence does something else. It makes others in the room uncomfortable. Without the noise of a direct conflict, they are left to simply observe David's actions. A senior colleague who had been half listening now looks from Evelyn's silent face to David's suddenly strained one, and a question forms in his mind. He asks, "David, that's an interesting take. Evelyn, what was your initial data on this when you first brought it up?" The question is a dagger wrapped in velvet. The truth has been revealed not by Evelyn's protest, but by her powerful strategic silence. She did not have to fight for credit. Her silence created the conditions for the truth to be recognized on its own. It exposed his weakness without her ever having to display her anger. Optionally, send a brief, neutral follow-up note to document your contribution without re-entering the debate. Third, consider the dynamic between two friends, Alex and Ben. Alex is going through a difficult career transition and often confides in Ben. Ben, wanting to be a good friend, immediately shifts into advisor mode. Before Alex can even finish describing his problem, Ben is already interrupting with solutions. "You should update your resume like this. You need to be networking on this platform. What you're failing to see is..." Alex leaves every conversation feeling unheard and strangely diminished, as if his problem was just a puzzle for Ben to solve, not an experience to be shared. Ben, on the other hand, feels a sense of satisfaction, believing he has dispensed valuable wisdom. Alex, tired of this pattern, decides to change his approach. During their next talk, as he begins to share a new anxiety about an upcoming interview, Ben predictably jumps in. "Okay, stop. Here's what you need to do." First, the old Alex would have politely listened, his own thoughts and feelings getting buried under the avalanche of advice. The new Alex holds up a hand gently but firmly. He doesn't say, "You're not listening," or "Let me finish." He just holds up his hand and meets Ben's gaze, and then he waits in total silence. The silence is a showstopper. Ben's flow of advice comes to an abrupt halt. He's confused. He was in the middle of a monologue, a performance of expertise. The silence forces him to actually look at Alex not as a problem to be solved, but as a person who has just put up a boundary. After a few deeply uncomfortable seconds, Ben asks, "What?" Alex lowers his hand and says quietly, "Ben, I trust your advice. But right now, I don't need a solution. I just need to talk it through." Ben is taken aback. For the first time, the true nature of their dynamic is laid bare. He wasn't being a friend, he was being a consultant. He was using Alex's vulnerability to feed his own need to feel wise and in control, his own shadow. Alex's silence didn't create an argument about communication styles. It created a moment of profound truth about the nature of their friendship, allowing for a deeper, more authentic connection to be formed. Finally, let us look at Chloe and her mother. Chloe loves her mother, but their relationship is defined by a subtle, lifelong pattern of emotional manipulation. Her mother uses guilt as her primary tool. "I suppose I'll just be here all alone for the holidays? Or don't worry about me, I know you're too busy with your important life." Every conversation is a minefield of unsaid obligations and emotional debts. Chloe's automatic response has always been a torrent of words, apologies, justifications, elaborate plans to prove her love and devotion. She spends weeks before every phone call in a state of preemptive anxiety. After realizing her words were fuel for this dynamic, she tries the path of silence. Her mother calls. "Your cousin is bringing her whole family to visit me next month. I guess some people still have time for their old mothers." The bait is laid. The trap is sprung. The old Chloe would have immediately started explaining her work schedule, promising to visit soon, defending her own love. The new Chloe pauses. She lets the statement hang in the air. She takes a deep breath, and then she says, with warmth but with no justification, "That sounds lovely. I hope you have a wonderful time with them." Silence. Her mother is stunned. The script has been violated. She was expecting a reaction, an emotional flurry that she could then manage and control. She gets none. She tries again. "It's just so hard doing everything around here by myself." Chloe listens. She hears the underlying feeling, but she refuses to engage with the manipulative framing. She replies, "It sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed, Mom." She validates the feeling, but does not accept the blame. Again, there is silence. Her mother, with no emotional reaction to feed on, is left with only two choices: escalate into overt anger or be honest. After a long, uncomfortable pause, her mother's voice cracks just slightly. "I just miss you." There it is. The truth. Hidden beneath layers of passive aggression and guilt tripping was a simple, vulnerable core of loneliness. Chloe's strategic, loving silence did not punish her mother. It liberated her from her own ineffective strategy. It allowed a moment of real, raw, and honest connection to finally occur. A connection that years of frantic explanations had made impossible. These are not just stories. They are blueprints. To wield this power, you must train your mind. This is the manual for that transformation. A crucial preface, these practices are designed for navigating standard relationship dynamics. If you are in a situation involving emotional or physical abuse or coercive control, your priority must be safety. Please seek professional support over applying these techniques. The 4 disciplines of strategic silence, crucially, the strategic silence we practice is not stonewalling. Stonewalling often functions as a passive-aggressive withdrawal and can be experienced as punishing. Strategic silence, by contrast, is a conscious act of perception. It is not cold absence, it is warm boundary presence. Discipline 1, the unsent reply. A practice for the digital age. The principle behind this practice is to sever the conditioned link between stimulus and response. Our modern world has trained us for instant reaction. This discipline is about reclaiming the space between feeling an impulse and acting on it. For the next 7 days, every time you receive a provocative email or text, write out your immediate emotional reply. Get it all out. Then save it as a draft and wait 1 hour. When you return, reread your words. Then ask one question: what happens if I send nothing? In most cases, the answer is nothing. The argument dissolves. You keep your peace. Then delete the draft. The common trap is feeling a sense of unresolved tension, believing you need to respond to feel complete. Recognize this as a phantom limb of your old, reactive self. The true feeling of completion comes not from winning the argument, but from choosing to preserve your own peace. Note, this does not apply to time-sensitive or legally important communications that require a timely response. Discipline 2, the observational pause. A practice for a real-world conversation. The principle here is to shift from a mindset of rebuttal to one of reception. In conversation, we are rarely listening, we are waiting for our turn to speak. The observational pause forces you into a state of true, deep listening. In your next significant conversation, when the other person finishes speaking, implement a 3-second conscious pause. In those 3 seconds, do not formulate a rebuttal. Instead, ask yourself, what is the emotion behind their words? What is their fear? This pause will often de-escalate conflict and give you a profound strategic advantage, as you will be responding not to their superficial words, but to their hidden motive. The trap is to use the pause simply to reload your own argument with more precision. You must be disciplined. The goal is not to find a better weapon, but to understand if a battle is necessary at all. Your silence becomes a tool for diagnosis, not just for engagement in a battle. Discipline 3, the loving boundary. A practice for close relationships. The principle here is to separate validation from agreement. The people we love most are often the most adept at pushing our emotional buttons. This discipline is about using silence as a warm, clear, and unbreachable boundary. The next time a loved one uses emotional pressure to get you to do something that violates your peace, use this 2-step formula. Step 1. Validate their feeling, not their story. Say, I hear that you are feeling hurt. This shows you are listening and you care. Step 2. State your position calmly and then stop talking. I understand, but I won't be able to do that. Your gentle, unwavering silence after this statement is the boundary. It is a powerful declaration that you honor both their feelings and your own limits. The trap is the wave of guilt that follows. They may react with anger or sadness. Your job is to hold the boundary without absorbing their reaction. This is not your responsibility to fix. If further conversation is needed, you can always add, this isn't the right time, but I'm open to discussing it later. Discipline 4, devoid of expectation. The most advanced practice. The principle here is the ultimate act of liberation, releasing the need to control others. We are constantly projecting our own expectations onto others and then getting angry or disappointed when they fail to meet them. This discipline is about withdrawing that projection completely. Choose one person in your life with whom you have a difficult relationship. For 1 week, consciously suspend all expectations of them. Enter every interaction with a mindset of pure observation. Your mental mantra will be, I am here only to observe what is. This radical act of withdrawing your own needs and expectations from the dynamic creates a space of profound freedom. You stop judging their actions against your own internal scorecard. You simply see them as they are. The trap is that your mind will try to sneak expectations back into the back door, thinking if I do this, maybe they will finally change. You must be vigilant in rooting out this transactional thinking. The goal is your own freedom, not their transformation. You are detaching from the outcome. You have spent your life believing your power lies in your voice. Today, you must understand that a far greater power lies in your ability to control its absence. The world is a noisy, chaotic stage, filled with actors desperate for attention, screaming their lines into the void. Strategic silence is your refusal to be just another actor. It is your elevation to the role of the director. It is the mirror you hold up to the world, forcing it to see itself without distortion. It is the calm, unshakable center of the hurricane of other people's emotions. It is the sovereign territory of your own mind, a place where their provocations cannot find entry, where their manipulations find no purchase. To be silent is not to be passive. It is to be a guardian of your own energy, your own peace, your own perception. Stop giving the world the key to your inner state. Stop participating in games you did not design. The moment you stop compulsively explaining yourself is the moment you reclaim your power. Let their words, their accusations, their dramas crash against the shores of your stillness. Watch what happens. Watch who gets uncomfortable. Watch who gets angry. Watch who reveals the very thing they're trying to hide. When you go silent, their true colors emerge. And in that silence, so do yours. Share your commitment in the comments. We invite you to use a template. For instance, I will practice discipline 1 this week in work meetings. My one-line goal is to listen more than I speak.
Your story could be the catalyst for someone else's breakthrough.